When recording vendor payments or other transactions for accounting that don't require any further processing or printing, these can be entered through the Accounts Payable module. Easily match payments and debits to outstanding invoices, and investigate historical transactions. In the Accounts Payable module, the Open Accounts tab has a grid that displays only vendors with a non-zero balance outstanding, and columns with aged summary amounts by document date for various date ranges. The Open Items tab lists all outstanding payable transactions for these vendors. The Reports tab gives you access to accounts payable reports, such as open and aged payables, or accounts payable ledger reports, such as vendor transactions, or 1099 forms for U.S. vendors. From this module, you can create a new vendor transaction, either from the plus toolbar button or when editing the vendor accounts payable. There are some differences in what you can do, depending on which way you start. Or alternatively, you can create a batch of payments for multiple vendors at once, to either print checks or generate an electronic fund transfer file for uploading to your bank. When you edit a vendor accounts payable record, you can see specific information about the vendor, including the contact as assigned in company settings, and certain statistics relevant to payments. You can open the vendor record to see everything in a separate window. At the bottom is a list of outstanding transactions, displaying their respective outstanding balance and other information. You can also view or edit communications for accounts payable, which are separate from vendor communications, for warnings or notes about vendor transactions, and user-defined fields to store additional information for accounts payable that is not already available. There are many vendor transaction types you can create from here. From the New button, you can either choose the specific transaction type from the pop-up list, or just click the button and choose the type later. Creating a new transaction within the Accounts Payable record restricts entry to this vendor, and choosing the type from the pop-up restricts changing the type as well. The most common transactions entered within Accounts Payable are payments and expense invoices not generated from purchase orders. For invoices, you only need to enter the transaction date and any other identifying information. The terms code from the vendor determines the due date and any early payment discounts, and this can be changed. The expense account comes from either the vendor or the company settings special purchases account. A memo field provides a place to enter a description or comment for this invoice. Then in the total field, enter the after-tax amount. The tax value and pre-tax subtotal will be calculated from this, and the tax amount can be modified if a minor correction is necessary. If you use job costing, you can assign a job number and account to this invoice. The invoice entry is now ready to be posted, where you can choose to either post the invoice directly to the vendor and ledger, or if user settings allow, first review the ledger accounting activity and even make changes, such as split the expense amount across multiple accounts. The other common transactions are payments on invoices, which can be done only when editing the Accounts Payable record. These are very easy to create. Just click the checkbox next to each invoice being paid, then use the Payment button to start the entry. If you wanted to investigate details about invoices that came from purchase orders, you can view the PO and load that information. When entering the payment, indicate if a check or remittance form will be generated, and enter the check number if one will be printed. Choose to pay either the full invoice amount or edit the pay amount to only pay a portion of the invoice. If an invoice has an early payment discount, either from the terms or if you override it here, you can choose to take or remove that discount. Then you can post the payment and review accounting if allowed. Print the check if requested, and invoice balances are updated on this screen, with fully paid invoices no longer being displayed on this open list. You can also record vendor payments on account without assigning them to invoices. Create a new transaction and choose the payment type. Enter the amount of the payment and any other required information. Then post the transaction to the vendor. In the future, when this payment on account is meant to be assigned to an invoice, you only have to check both of these transactions and then click the Apply button to link them together. Or if payment was applied to the wrong invoice by mistake, you can select the invoice and choose to unapply the payment if user security allows. If you choose to create a new transaction from the plus toolbar button on the list, the vendor code will be blank to start with, so you can enter or select it here. Exactly as when editing a vendor accounts payable record, you can create any of the transaction types here. This includes both vendor credit and debit transactions, which effectively decreases or increases the overall vendor balance outstanding and the selected expense ledger account, but not a specific invoice balance. Posting a vendor credit or debit creates a new outstanding transaction that can be applied to an invoice manually in the same way as unapplied payments. One transaction type that can only be created from the plus button is an invoice for a one-time vendor that you may not do business with again. When the vendor field is blank, you can select the one-time vendor choice, which changes the entry screen to include both the invoice and payment portions of a transaction at the same time. Enter the terms and expense account for the invoice, and the payment account and check number for the payment. You may also want to enter the vendor address to print on the check. After entering the transaction total, you can post this transaction for accounting and printing if selected. Posting this invoice actually creates a new vendor record, which you can use should you purchase from them again. When a vendor has paid invoices in their history, you can choose to reveal them from the Show button, selecting only those from the past year or the entire history. The invoice list will now include invoices no longer outstanding, with the applied credits viewable to expand, either from the arrowhead or from the Expand All button. Or you can list all payments by clicking the Show Debits button and expand applied invoices in the same way. For any rows that have matching transactions, you can use the View History button to not only see how transactions were applied, but also when, which could be multiple times in the case of partial payments. If a posted transaction needs to be reversed, you can select it from the list and then click the Void button, if user security allows this. Not only will this reverse the accounting for that transaction, but all paid invoices from voided payments will be restored as outstanding. If you would like more information about Spire Accounting, access the link in the description below to our homepage. Read the online manual help for additional assistance. Watch more videos from this playlist. And subscribe to the Spire YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.